Today's episode is brought to you by the NBA Store. A new year brings the start of a new NBA season. Suit up with the latest gear to show your support for your team. We may be sidelined from going to the arena, but that doesn't mean you can't watch basketball from your couch in style. We are teaming up with the NBA and Podgo to bring our listeners up to 75% off on select items. Yeah, you heard that right. Go to podgo.co/NBA for up to 75% off select items from the NBA Store. The NBA, where amazing happens.
Welcome to the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. It's a perspective on the classics from a fresh point of view. We appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You could be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today is yours truly, and with me I have, in the place to be, my boy J.O., of course, chopping it up with me once again about all the classics. I want to give a shout out to everybody out there listening stateside and worldwide for all of your support again. Thank you for showing love to us on our new host on Red Circle, and of course, thank you for showing love on the YouTube channel. Continue subscribing to the YouTube channel and checking us out and spreading the word. Get the word out there. We got lots of new things we're going to coming up with this year, lots of bonus content, so y'all stay tuned. Check up on the YouTube channel and everything else, man. Stay engaged with us, and thanks for supporting the Vault. As we like to say each and every day here on the Vault, our motto is hashtag open the Vault, hashtag nothing but the classics. And Jay, we got another one here today. It's a little bit unconventional what we normally do here on the Vault. For those here which you know, we normally do on albums of 20, 25, and 30 years on their release dates. This one is a little bit out of order. And the reason being why I had to do it like this and we had to schedule it so far ahead is because around the anniversary date of this album, the schedule is so stacked, I needed to find some open dates to be able to put some albums in place that I know that we needed to cover. So this one is not exactly on the anniversary date, but it is celebrating its 30th anniversary. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Out of the Fifth Ward of Houston, the third studio album by the Geto Boys, We Can't Be Stopped. It was released on July 9th, 1991. Their most successful album released in terms of units sold. And it was released, of course, on the iconic Rap-A-Lot Records. The classic Rap-A-Lot Records, as a matter of fact. And it was recorded between 1990 to 1991 with a runtime of 51 minutes and 45 seconds. Producers on this, Bushwick Bill, James Smith, John Bido, John C., Roland, Scarface, Simon, and Willie D. And the Geto Boys, of course, made up of the trio of Scarface, Bushwick Bill, and Willie D. But originally, that's not how the Geto Boys was made up. For those who don't know, the Geto Boys was actually originally formed in 1987, was made up of Bushwick Bill, Raheem, the Sire Jukebox, and Sir Rap-A-Lot. And Raheem and Sir Rap-A-Lot left, and the group added, who was an original Geto Boy member, DJ Ready Red, Prince Johnny C, and then, of course, who was known as Bushwick Bill. Back then, he was known as Little Billy. He was a dancer. The first album in that iteration of the Geto Boys on Rap-A-Lot Records did not do well. So what happened is that the label dropped them and ended up reconstituting the group by adding on Willie D and Scarface, who at that time were up-and-coming rappers in the Houston area. And they released their second album, which was the first debut album of this iteration of the Geto Boys, which was Grip It on Another Level, which came out in 1989. There was a self-titled album, Geto Boys, in 1990, and then We Can't Be Stopped in 1991. Now, during the recording of We Can't Be Stopped, DJ Ready Red actually left the group during the recording, and the most known version of the Geto Boys of Scarface, Willie D, and Bushwick is what came to be known for the majority of the rest of their time while they were together as a group. But this was, for a lot of us who weren't in the South and were in Houston that didn't necessarily know a lot about the Geto Boys, this was really our introduction to them for the most part, and it was due to a very successful single the only single on this album, which is the classic track, My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me. So here we are, Jay. We can't be stopped by the Geto Boys. And the one thing that I sort of like to say about the Geto Boys is they sort of like the Trouble 3 groups as far as when it comes to the RIAA and then also the censors and the government. I would put them in the category along with NWA and also with 2 Live Crew.
Absolutely.
About those who gave the censors hell in regards to their content. Now, a lot of people will talk about, as far as the Geto Boys content, they talk a lot about street life. There's a lot of stuff, that's been described as misogyny. A lot of it has even been described as what they call horrorcore music. And Grip It on Another Level probably was described as one of the earliest forerunners when it comes to horrorcore rap or hip hop. By listening to the first few albums, like I think a few years ago I listened to Grip It on Another Level, which was the first one involving Willie D and Scarface, and was surprised at how explicit some of the content was, even for 1989. Taking a brief listen to Geto Boys, the second album, but then this one, you really hear it. It's like you can hear why people were probably so upset like in 1991.
Absolutely.
Listening to the content, because even like it's been 30 years, bro. Like it's obviously now it's just like you can even think back and look at it like how much more conservative what America was back then, and now listening to the content, the lyrics and things, it's like whoa. I could only imagine just how berserk the censors and everyone activists probably were up in arms. So you could see why they lumped in with that group with NWA, 2 Live Crew, that this really is what gave the censors their test. And to be like, okay, you see this little sticker right here? We're going to have to put this on these albums to let people know, like, hey, parents, you might want to check and listen into what your kids are listening to.
Right.
And they were really pioneers in that sense, along with 2 Live Crew and NWA, the fact that they really helped to change the way that we classified rap in regards to stuff that may be friendly and stuff that's not necessarily so clean or friendly.
Yeah, I mean, people like, they kind of undermine like how important these 3 groups were in the hip hop, especially 2 Live Crew. I mean, because of course, like, Geto Boys, NWA, they had the explicit lyrics and everything like that. But I mean, Luke and them was going to jail behind this stuff. You know what I mean? So like, They was actually getting locked up.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think NWA got locked up too at some point.
Yeah, they did.
I mean, like, and just imagine, like, what I'm saying, had they lost those cases, I mean, because they basically won under, the whole thing of the Constitution of freedom of speech. So
yeah,
if they would have lost that case, man, like, hip hop would probably be a memory at this point.
Exactly. And so let's talk about how bad things were when it came to Geto Boys, because while they didn't go to jail, there definitely was a problem with the distribution of their album. The first album, the very first one for the first version of Geto Boys, which was Making Trouble in 1988, and then Grip It on That Other Level in 1989, which was the most recent one that we know of, version of the Geto Boys. Geto Boys was 1990. The third album was remixed by Rick Rubin, which they were signed to. However, because of the content of their music, they had a falling out with Geffen, who was the label's distributor. They didn't want anything to do with their lyrics. Any of the, they said it was too violent, it was too misogynistic, it was too graphic. And as a result of that, Rick Rubin had to arrange for them to get distribution through Warner Brother Records, ironically enough. The other part of the fallout of this is that having to go through another label for distribution, because that's the problem that you deal with, because they're like, hey, this is too violent, it's too graphic, we can't deal with that. So this album with having to get it distributed through Warner Brother Records is a result of them not being able to do it through Geffen, because Geffen wanted nothing to do with it. It is crazy considering, like, that's how we have to understand. We're coming off of, Reagan presidency into a Bush 41 presidency, and the country was still, hip hop was still relatively new to a lot of, and in the hip hop they knew wasn't anything that was it was tame for the most part. When you start getting into the NWA and the Public Enemies and the 2 Live Crews, that's the part of hip hop that America didn't necessarily want to see. Just part of the history that goes on. But just here we are with Geto Boys. We can't be stopped. So 30 years ago, the one thing that I know more about than anything about this album, the single, which we all know, The Mind Playing Tricks on Me. And the two things that I remember, one is about how many times it was being played on the radio at that time, and the differences between one, what you heard on the radio, then eventually what you heard on the album. But then really the big thing that we all remember was the music video. Like everybody remembers that classic video with the three of them in there, and the images and that you saw in the video that really helped to propel the popularity of the song. Other than that, I didn't necessarily know a whole lot about this album and didn't really listen to it until fairly recently, the whole album itself. You read a lot of things about the Grip It on that other level and how important it was to Houston hip hop, because that basically helped to kick down the door for Houston artists, really is what it did. And Geto Boys was really the first act out of Houston that made a nationwide impact. So just your thoughts, Jay, on you listening to it and what you thought about it.
Yeah, so I mean, like back then, like, you know, basically, like, you know, I was like 10 years old. So the main one I knew was like Mom Playing Tricks on Me. And that was all over the radio. You know what I'm saying? It was like on BT, MTV and everything. And Jukebox Network, I think we still called it back then.
Yeah, Jukebox. Jukebox. Man. Yeah.
Good old, like with that robotic voice, UKB, DVJ and all that stuff. Like,
right.
You back, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Taking it back. Right. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Back then, I mean, I really couldn't process what they were talking about. But then, you know, I mean, I guess like now, I mean, in this climate, and you go back and listen to that one particular track, I mean, it just talks about like, it really like put a highlight on before it's time, I say the mental health issues, like mental illness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Saying like, you know, being paranoid and hallucinations and stuff like that, which, you know, was pretty much no one talked about in the Black community. I still don't think they really talk about it in the Black community, but like, throughout the years, actually, I got the album and like listened to it, and like, I just remember like how aggressive Willie D sounded on his joints. You know what I mean? Like,
hey, you're right, exactly.
It's been some years, but now listen to it now. I mean, Willie D sounds just as much aggressive as he did then.
Yeah.
But then, like, you know, the subject matter of it, like, you know, now being a full-fledged, whole-grown adult, like, they operate from the same vein that Tupac did, as far as like, you know, music back then that talked about issues that are still like relevant to this day.
Yeah.
So like, for all the controversy and lyrics and all like that, like, you know, the subject matter is still relevant. So it's like, you know, I just thought they were geniuses for that.
Yeah.
I mean, throughout everything they've been going through.
Yeah, definitely. I really think listening to some songs, especially on here, songs like, you know, Fuck a War, Mom Playing Tricks on Me,
right?
You know, Ain't With Being Broken, you know, things like that. You talk about like, you know, Another Nigga in the Morgue, things like that. You sort of hear and just like know that it's still stuff that's relevant to this day. The thing that always intrigued me about Geto Boys was this: the difference in the three members that were involved in this version of the group. You got Scarface, who is grizzled veteran, been around for a while. Back then, you could sort of tell that there was something a little bit different about him than the rest of the group. Willie D has always been an interesting character to me, you know, the gangster of love. But like you said, he sounds really, really aggressive on this record. And it kind of still rings true to what he is today. If you know and follow Willie D on social media, and even to listen to the podcast that he has, it's he's like that one reckless friend that you're around that will say anything out of his mouth around anyone. Particularly, he will say anything around women and won't really care exactly how misogynistic it sounds or
not at all.
At all, you know, but he'll just do it because he's reckless. And then Bushwick is just like, you know, he's one of the most unique characters in hip hop. Like when you talk about unique characters, it's almost like you can look at him and it's like, you know, he's almost in a category sort of by himself, you know? Other than the fact that physically you look at him, he's only 3'8" tall. And, but he also had a really unique voice as well. And he, more than the other two, really sort of dug into that horrorcore stuff more than anybody else. I mean, even on one track on here, and we'll get into the tracks, even like on Chucky, you start to hear about like, you know, how explicit he is. Like he's almost much more explicit than Scarface and Willie D on this in his lyrics. I mean, the imagery in a lot of the tracks on here, the one thing I will have to say about the Geto Boys is that they were raw. Like we talked a lot about when you hear about raw rap and raw hip hop, like the imagery, the things that they explain, how explicit it is. The imagery in a lot of these lyrics is, it's really jarring at sometimes to listen to. Even as a grown man, like in my late 30s, I'm like, wow. You know, now I know there's a reason why I wasn't listening to this at 10 years old. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I mean, I've dug into the Geto Boys. I mean, individually, of course, listening to Scarface. I'm a huge fan of Scarface. I've been a fan of some of the stuff Willie D has done. He's a great follow on social media nowadays. And of course, the late, great Bushwick Bill, who actually passed away, I believe it is almost 2 years ago now, from pancreatic cancer. And, you know, and also the original DJ Ready Red passed away as well in 2018. Now we're going to get into highlights and sort of give our opinion on what we think about the tracks. So, Jay, just give me an idea of your highlights of the tracks that you listen to and any lowlights if you have them.
Yeah, so as far as like highlights, I'm going to have to say, I mean, I would definitely say Fuck a War.
Yeah.
You know, especially like, you know, everything that we've seen in our lifetime as far as like, you know, war in Iraq and everything like that. I mean, shout out to all the troops. I mean, we thank them for their service. At the same time, you know, the reason behind it, I mean, just like how it was relevant back then with the Gulf War, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
even though it was two separate wars and two separate leaders, I mean, yeah, Bush versus Bush 41 and then George W., like, I mean, it was still the same problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, that's why I say it's a crazy example how that's still relevant. I mean, of course, My Mind Playing Tricks on Me, you know, that's just a classic joint.
Yeah.
Like that sample spin alone was just like mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
I might need to put this like in my song rotation for like Ain't What Being Broke, you know what I'm saying? As far as like motivational music, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
I feel you.
yeah, try and get them coins, you know what I'm saying? So, I would just say just off the horrorcore, looking at it as objective man, like the horrorcore aspect, I would say Chucky.
Mm-hmm.
It's a funny joint to me, but I'm not a gentleman. Like
Willie D, man, at his reckless best. I mean, oh man.
it pretty much just it was a blatant to dismantle ladies first, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so, and like, just like the lyrical content behind it's like, damn, Willie D, like you was raw back then.
Right. Exactly. Riggedy.
and then, as far as lowlights, I don't know if we really call it a low light, but I didn't really think the Punk Bitch Game joint should have been on there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to really serve a purpose to me. I mean, I
Yeah.
can see like being in concert, like, you know, the hype of the crowd and the momentum, everything there. I just didn't think, you know what I'm saying, really did any justice on the album.
Yeah.
That's probably the only low light I could think of off this joint, to be honest.
True. Yeah. So my highlights, I definitely was a fan of all of the solo Scarface tracks. So that was Another Nigga in the Morgue. Gotta Let Your Nuts Hang, obviously. I think that's probably Scarface at his best. And then Quickie, which is actually a pretty, you know, funny track. And each one of the members has 3 solo tracks on here. And then there are 3 tracks where they all rap together. Crazy thing about this as well is that I'm Not a Gentleman by Willie D. It's so funny that you mentioned that because I wrote this in my notes. This only could have been done 30 years ago. It couldn't have been done today.
Oh, hell no.
Like the fact that once he was using it as a response to Ladies First, and the fact that he's using everything to say, nah, fuck that. I don't care. Fuck all this shit. Like, you know, I'm not no motherfucking gentleman. I think the words that they would use for that today was, this would be misogynistic. It would be, toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
It would be promoting the patriarchy.
Right.
All those buzzwords that they talk about nowadays.
like-
Yeah. You know, all those buzzwords are everything. That's exactly what that would be. And it's crazy thinking that he would use that and go at that song and the concept of that song would fire back on something like this. That's what's wild about it. Gotta love Fuck a War. Definitely have to love Mom Playing Tricks on Me. You're right, man. That sample, which is Hung Up on My Baby by Isaac Hayes, just that guitar and that guitar riff on the bridge and right before the song begins, and the imagery of that song, especially the opening lyrics on the song that Scarface says, you know, about at night I can't sleep, I toss and turn. Candlesticks in the dark, visions of bodies being burned. I mean, it's just like one of those opening lines and lyrics that just stick with you in one of those classic songs. That's one of the big ones, though. But that song will always sort of stand out. Ain't With Being Broke, I got to get you with that. And to me, a standout on that is Bushwick Bill's verse, especially talking about he was watching rats and roaches eat better than he was. And, you know, they couldn't afford milk, so they was sucking on his mother's titty. Like, it was just like, whoa, that's crazy, man. Trophy was a good way to end the album out. It was talking about the whole thing about the Grammys. And, at that time, man, rap music was still at war with the Grammys because they were awarding rap one award, and that award wasn't even televised on television, So,
Right.
And it's amazing that, 30 years from now, how big we've gotten, and hip hop is sort of taking over the Grammys now as far as like their physical spectacle and everything. But they still don't get the respect that they reserve. But if you could imagine 30 years ago how bad it was, that
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I will say for this Grammy round, as far as rap, somebody must have gave like a really stern talking to, because those choices.
Yeah, they're really good.
Damn, Gibbs and Jay Electronica. Like, oh shit.
Yeah,
like
Electronica, Nas, exactly. Yeah. That's how bad it was back then. Yeah, not really any low light on this for me. I do have to agree a little bit with the punk bitch game, because I think that was something ill to have in a concert. But if they could have taken that and then flipped it into a song, if they were willing to if they were willing to have like a female MC on that track with them, then that would have been a cool concept for a song. You know what I'm saying? But I don't think it would have been, at least back then, there were any female MCs at that time that would have been willing to be on a Geto Boys track, considering the fact that how misogynistic their lyrics were. I definitely wasn't getting anything from Queen Latifah or Moni Love, considering what was on this joint, and probably not anything with MC Lyte or Roxanne or anyone else like that. Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of a missed opportunity to me. But other than that, really solid tracks. One, you sort of get captured in by how gripping and aggressive the tone is, a lot of these, and how dark some of the lyrics are. Really solid offering, I will have to say, in all. And lots of samples being used in the production. So we talk about that Isaac Hayes sample on Mine's Playing Trick on Me on that Homie Don't Play At. There were things like, samples by Funkadelic, Knee Deep by Funkadelic, also More Bounce to the Ounce by Zapp and Roger, The Atomic Dog by George Clinton, Pumping It Up by P-Funk All-Star, So Rough, So Tough by Roger Troutman, I'm Not a Gentleman I Heard That by Quincy Jones, and also You'll Like It Too by Funkadelic, Fuck a War by Devil with the Bus by Sound Experience. So there are a lot of different samples on here. Quickie with Impeach the President by the Honey Drippers and Oh Honey by the Delegation. One thing I do have to give, like Geto Boys, and then also any like West Coast, and of course that part of like the Midwest to down South, like, Southwest, like sort of hip hop groups, they were really into the whole funk genre. You know what I'm saying? And they based a lot of their production around that. So it's another thing I sort of messaged as well, is that there were a lot of funk elements from samples that were being used. So now we're going to get into notable quotables. See what you got, Jay, what you have for notable quotables. What do you have in regards to a notable verse?
I'd probably say like Bushwick's verse on Fuck a War, like the whole thing, motherfucker war, that's how I feel, sending a nigga to a dentist to get killed because two suckers can't agree on something. 1,000 motherfuckers die for nothing. You can't pay me to join the army camp or any motherfucking military branch of the United goddamn States of America. Be a soldier, what for? They put niggas on the front line, but when it comes to getting ahead, they put us way behind. I ain't getting my legs shot off with Bush old ass on TV playing golf. But when you come to my house with that draft shit, I'm gonna shoot your funky ass, bitch, and nigga die for a brawl. But I ain't fighting behind no goddamn oil. I get you motherfuckers I don't know. Yo, Bush, I ain't your damn hoe. The enemy is right here, G. The foreigners never did shit to me. All of those wasted lives, only 1 or 2 get recognized. But what good is it matter when you did? Tell Uncle Sam I said, you know what I mean? So
motherfucker war, right?
War,
yeah.
Right? Like it's just. Like that whole thing. I'm pretty sure people was like saying that about Vietnam back in the day. Like the people over there ain't did nothing to me. Like, why I got to fight them for? Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, that second verse of that Fuck a War, he said exactly that. In that song, he did say, in Vietnam, a lot of niggas died young. POWs got hung. What the fuck do I know about a grenade? All I know is a rap to my 12 gauge. And what if that pin gets stuck? Several more casualties show up. It's like the same thing he's talking about, So it's like, you could take any war in American history starting from Vietnam on, and you'll get the same exact response from a lot of different people. So it's crazy how the wars and the locations of those wars change and the messages don't change much at all. So yeah, you're right. It's that was definitely one of my favorites about Fuck a War on there, and just sort of reminds to me again about how much at war the hip hop generation of that part was at war with Ronald Reagan and George Bush. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because they were anti-rap everything. You know what I'm saying? Anti-rap. Some people say anti-black as well. So my verse comes from, and notable quotable comes from Scarface. Third verse, actually, on Mind Playing Tricks on Me.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, day by day, it's more impossible to cope. I feel like I'm the one that's doing dope. Can't keep a steady hand because I'm nervous. Every Sunday morning, I'm in service, praying for forgiveness and trying to find an exit out the business. I know the Lord is looking at me, but yet and still, it's hard for me to feel happy. I often drift while I drive, having fatal thoughts of suicide. Bang and get it over with, and then I'm worry free, but that's bullshit. I got a little boy to look after, and if I died, then my child will be a bastard. I had a woman down with me, but to me, it seemed like she was down to get me. She helped me out in this shit, but to me, she was just another bitch. Now she's back with her mother, and now I'm realizing that I love her, and now I'm feeling lonely. My mom's playing tricks on me. Yeah, it's just like, you just think about like that verse. I mean, it's talking about like, you know, we talked about the importance of, you know, the stigma of mental health and depression and things like that, paranoia. And people will say that, oh, it's just like, you know, you're paranoid and stuff like that. But it's like those things just talk about like all this stuff seems real to people, especially if you're experiencing it, you know? And I think we sort of looked at this song like it was like, yo, it's a pretty cool song or whatever, and nice beat and nice lyrics, but the message underlying with it more than anything else really sort of speaks to a deeper struggle. You know what I mean? It's it's really the whole thing. I mean, even with Willie D's verse talking about being in the car and then these headlights that are following him, they've been following him for the last couple of, you know, hours, and he's getting scared, thinking about whether the nigga he shot last week, is it the police, is it this or that? And it's really people that deal with stuff like that now. And it's even 30 years ago, talk a song about like that now, that's like talking about that whole thing about paranoia and mental health and issues and things like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, really kind of struck me. A lot of people will pick that first verse, but to me, that second Scarface verse in this song is really what stuck with me more than anything else. So yeah. We didn't talk about this earlier, but I did want to touch on this. The cover of this album is another point of contention. Because of now, for those that aren't in front of a computer, and if you're looking at this pod, you'll be able to see the album on the cover art. It's a photo of Bushwick Bill in the hospital. He's on a gurney with a bandage on his face that's certainly peeled off, with Willie D to his right and Scarface to his left, sort of pulling the gurney down the hallway. So the story around that photo is this. Well, sometime during that year, what happened is that Bushwick Bill, I guess under the influence of drugs, and then also was having an argument with his lady. Supposedly he was under the influence of PCP and Everclear, which is a hell of a mixture, you know?
Lethal.
And he was egging his girlfriend on to shoot him during an argument, and they got into a tussle, and he got shot in the eye. And he eventually later told Howard Stern that it was a scheme for his mother to collect his life insurance so that she could pay the deductible on her medical insurance. Shows you just how twisted this plot and this scheme was. So Bushwick Bill was in the hospital. Willie D and Scarface both get to the hospital along with their management. Now they're working on this, you know, this album is getting ready to come out. They wanted to make sure he was all right, and they said he was going to survive. Then that's when Willie D said, hey, well, he's alive. Let's go ahead and shoot the album cover right now while he's in the hospital. I guess what happened is that, from what I understand, they all talked it over. They asked Bill whether he wanted to do it. He said he doesn't care. So then they asked the nurse for a gurney. Then they ended up wheeling him down the hall, and they got the picture of it. And it looks like he's holding the phone. And he is holding the phone, but he wasn't talking to anybody on it. He just peeled the bandage off, and then you see that image of them coming down the hallway. Now, afterwards, Bushwick Bill says that looking back on it, he felt some pain about it and regrets about doing it, because he said it still looks, you know, hurts me to look at that cover because it was a personal thing that I went through. I still feel the pain from the fact that I got a bullet in my brain. To see that picture only brings it back more, so I think it was pretty wrong of them to do it. Even though I went along with the program at first, I really didn't understand why the picture was so important for them, important enough to take the IV out of my arm and endanger my life by taking the patch off my eye. So he said I could have been blinded for life. And he said, and Face was against it the whole time. Now, Scarface says in an interview with Vibe in 2010, he said, if you look at my face when on the We Can't Be Stopped album cover, you can tell I didn't want to be a part of that photo shoot. Bill was still in the hospital. He was highly sedated, man. I strongly believed in what goes on in this house stays in this house. I really didn't want to put Bill out there like that. How many people have gotten their eyes shot out and captured it on an album cover for everyone to remember? It's hard to wake up in the morning and deal with that one. And Willie D sort of thinks that, he thinks that everybody's entitled to their opinion, but also knows that they went ahead and they still did it anyway. So that's what led to this infamous album photo being taken. And it's something that when you look at it, it is jarring because you do see Bushwick on that gurney and he's peeling that bandage off of his face. You could definitely tell that something happened to his eye. So, yeah, it was crazy. Definitely very jarring. Another thing about this album as well, this was an album that went platinum. It went platinum early in 1992. This is actually, from what I understand, as a group, their most successful one in regards to units being sold. Amazing that Geto Boys have been around this long, and this was the best-selling album that they had because they had some big ones. Resurrection, which came out in 96, was another big one because it was their reunion album. So,
right.
So yeah. So now we get to the test, the final test and the test of time. So whether we see, is it a certified classic, borderline classic just in its time, or not a classic? And then, of course, 7 to 10, how we feel about it. 7, not as strongly, and 10, very strongly, and anything in between. So, Jay, what say you? What do you say about this? We Can't Be Stopped.
Well, from listening to it a few years ago, listen to it now, I'm gonna have to say classic, and I'm gonna go 9 out of 10.
Okay. Definitely. I'm going to say that it's a certified classic as well. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, though, because I do think that, there was a missed opportunity on there as well. I do think there are parts of it that do sound a little dated, but you do also have to understand this is 1991, and then they were a lot of a different sound in 91 from that point, because there was nobody else really from Texas coming out, and that one had a nationwide audience. So this was almost like an acquired taste. I almost think whenever somebody breaks an area and comes out, like whether it's New Orleans or Atlanta or Houston or Miami, it's going to be a bit of an acquired taste for anybody. But, I do have to give Geto Boys that credit for really coming out and putting Houston on the map, and really getting them on the national hip hop landscape. So I'm going to say certified classic, and I'm going to give it an 8. I feel strongly about it. I think that Grip It on that other level probably gets more props than this one because that was their first one, and it is really seen as a groundbreaking release as far as Southern hip hop and Houston hip hop. But I'll put this one kind of right up there in regards to their best work. So there we are. Geto Boys, We Can't Be Stopped, 1991, 30 years ago, July 9th, 1991. A little bit early on the anniversary date, but we had to get this one in here, and we definitely didn't want to skip it. Y'all, make sure you go check it out and read about this album as well, and sort of take yourself back to a time and listen and put it into context in regards to how raw this album was in regards to that time that it was in and the space and where hip-hop was in America. It'd probably be very enlightening. And that is going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you are checking us out on our new host on Red Circle. You can download, stream, and subscribe to The Vault Classic Music Reviews on any one of our streaming sources. If you go to the link in our bio of any one of our social media pages, you can go there to our link tree. It has all of our streaming sources and all of our social media pages as well. You can find us on IG or Instagram on @VaultCMR Podcast, on Twitter @Vault Classic, and on Facebook and YouTube by searching the Vault Classic Music Reviews Podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook page, check in with us, engage with us on social media. We love interacting with our fans. We do it here all for you. We appreciate the support, and if you have a friend, tell a friend, and make sure that that friend tells a friend. Always remember to keep your headphone on and your music loud, but not too loud. And as we close, we'd like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because you were never destined or created to stay stationary in this life. And on that note, we say peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.